Teresa Skubic, and this is Forum Daily for Tuesday, February 3rd. Former Liberal cabinet minister and Toronto Police Chief Bill Blair is resigning from Parliament to become Canada's High Commissioner to the United Kingdom. Blair is the second Trudeau-era cabinet minister from Toronto to leave in the last few weeks, requiring 2 federal by-elections in the city in the coming months. Elected for the first time with a Liberal majority under Justin Trudeau in 2015, Blair held several cabinet portfolios over the next decade, including as Minister for Border Security, Public Safety, and most recently, National Defence. Longtime provincial NDP MPP for Scarborough Southwest, Dolly Begum, will be leaving the party to become the Liberal Party candidate for the riding when a federal by-election takes place. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced that he agreed to a trade deal with India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, where the U.S. will lower tariffs on goods from India to 18% from 25%. In a post on Truth Social, Trump said India will reduce trade barriers to zero and will also stop buying Russian oil. An additional 25% tariff penalty that the U.S. president imposed for New Delhi's refusal to stop buying oil from Russia will also be dropped. This announcement comes less than a week after India and the EU announced a free trade agreement, ending nearly 20 years of trade talks. I sat down with Andrew Donaldson, an editor at OrdinaryTimes.com, for more on why the U.S. is choosing to broker this agreement now.
Keyword said, we'll have to wait until this is all on paper. And remember, these are all arbitrary tariffs based on what President Trump says to try to get what he wants. So he can arbitrarily change it back to what he arbitrarily made it in the first place. This agreement has been coming for a while. Everybody that pays a lick of attention to world affairs understands the importance of India, not just now, but what they're going to be to the world economy the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years now that they have the largest population on earth and the room for an economy that should be exploding on the world stage over the coming years. The timing of this, though, is very much because of the kind of deal he can make, which is to undo the deal he made previously with putting tariffs on there. Based on what just happened, the EU and India just signed a massive free trade agreement, and massive is probably understating it. We are talking about 2 billion people. We are talking about 25% of global GDP that falls under that agreement potentially if it comes out the way we think. So that has already happened, and you had Modi and others calling that the mother of all agreements. Contrast that to Modi and his people calling this a wonderful agreement, and you can kind of read between the lines here. President Trump has had the financial world now surrounding him based on being able to arbitrarily put tariffs on everything, which is really a thing of Congress, but Congress won't take that power back just yet. But it's also ostracized the Americans in another way. So this is very much a reactionary agreement, even though it's been in the works for a long time. It's a return to the status quo that President Trump arbitrarily put ahead. And again, it's an agreement once it gets in paper. Right now, we just have what they're saying it's going to be, and we'll have to wait and see.
Well, Trump claims that India will reduce its trade barriers to zero. How realistic is that, and what would that actually mean for U.S. exporters?
In the abstract, it's very realistic, and it would be wonderful for everybody involved if that would happen. There is a trade deficit between India and America, like there is with just about everything. But President Trump has the belief, mistakenly by a lot of economic standards, that that's a bad thing, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just how trade works. Now, the other parts of this, if you go forward, is will it stay this way? Because we already know President Trump has a habit of changing these things based on what he wants going forward. So again, until it's in writing, it really doesn't matter a whole lot. But yes, in the abstract, it would be wonderful. And India and America, not just economically, but geopolitically, strategically, militarily, we've been trying for decades across multiple administrations to wean them off Russian arms and get them more into the fold of the EU and the American sphere of influence. That's going to take time over a long period of time. The oil concern is a real one where they get their natural resources from Russia. That's a legitimate concern as well. But things with diplomacy, especially economic diplomacy, take consistency over time, and we don't have that right now, and we need it going forward if this is going to really work.
And one of the biggest claims here is that India will stop buying Russian oil. How plausible is that given India's energy needs and its relationship with Moscow?
Immediately, it's feasible but unlikely in the near term. Now, what you're going to get is probably some kind of a phased agreement where it's like, we will cut down on what we're doing over X amount of years, things like that. There's been accusations about whether or not they participate in the, whatever you want to call it, the dark fleet oil and that sort of thing. That's for another time. But yes, there should be agreements and there would be a way to do that. However, all you got to do is look at a map. If they're going to buy oil and resources from America or Venezuela, as Trump is putting out, which doesn't have the infrastructure to do this just yet, so again, this would be in the future. You're still shipping it across the globe, and India is a lot closer to the Russian oil reserves in that way. So it is plausible, but it's something that's going to need dedicated diplomacy and economic push over the coming years, not just saying we're going to do it.
And what type of reaction do you think this new agreement will get from Russia?
Probably a wait and see like everybody else. They're way more worried about that EU free trade agreement we just discussed. That's something they're very concerned about because they can't really match that. Now, the natural resources part, the oil part, that is leverage we have. And like we mentioned before, they still have a vast amount of the Indian military, which has been growing, still uses Russian equipment, which means they need Russian logistical support to help. Now, they're trying to do some indigenous things, but these things take time. So Russia would have some leverage to try to do things. And Modi will do business with Putin. He's proven before he's done that, and he will continue to do so. This is why, again, it is vital, if you're an American with American interests at heart in the global affairs, to have consistent foreign policy that is reliable going forward, because these are not just daily win the news cycle type of things. These are things that will play out over generations going forward, and the consistency just is not there with the way President Trump is using these tariffs right now.
Now, I want to talk about the EU deal that you've alluded to a few times. So last week, India and the European Union made what they're calling the mother of all deals. How does the timing factor into this announcement? I mean, the EU and India made a deal last week, and now Donald Trump is choosing to work with India. Do we think that's a coincidence, or is the timing just uncanny?
Well, it could be, but it would stretch credulity to think it wasn't. This is definitely reactionary. The EU agreement didn't get a lot of play in the U.S. because of everything else that was going on domestically in the news cycle, especially the Minnesota stuff and things like that. But it is a massive deal, and the world stage is paying attention. And when we talk about the Americans being ostracized on the economic front worldwide, this is one of those things that we're talking about. It's not that they wouldn't have done the deal anyway, but it would have been something that you would have gone to the table with. It's like, okay, you're making this deal with the EU. What kind of deal are you going to make with us as well? And everybody wins. That's not how President Trump and his administration, his advisors view the world. They're not free traders. They don't think it. They think they're losing something in a lot of these trade deals unless they're getting exactly what they want. And that difference of opinion and that difference of worldview is really showing up. So when they're saying America's isolated, this is what they're talking about. These deals are getting done, and it's America getting left out and not being consulted and not being factored in when otherwise they normally would be.
Now, Trump is also pushing for Venezuela to do business with India in regards to their oil. How big of an impact could this potentially have on Cuba?
The Cuban piece of Venezuela is complicated, but it is important. Venezuela changing, if you change the dictatorship completely, that would greatly affect Cuba, and that would be a good thing for freedom. However, it does not look, now that we've gotten some distance, that a lot on the ground in Venezuela has actually changed. So how much is that actually going to change Cuba? We'll have to wait and see. Now, again, if you're just going to talk about the oil piece, the problem with the Venezuelan oil is it's super heavy crude. It takes a lot of refining to get it, much more refining than Texas or the Middle East or Alaska North Slope or the North Sea or the other places that we're used to. The infrastructure is years away from being able to really put it out at the way. So again, in the abstract, it's a great idea, but are you going to have the consistent diplomacy, the consistent infrastructure, and the consistent policy to see it forward so that you could go to places like India and go, okay, this is going to be online in 5 years or 10 years, and we want to have an agreement where you wean yourself off Russian oil in the next 10 years by these percentages, and we're going to match it. That's how you do those kind of agreements. Right now, we have the talk of doing it, but we don't see the actions that would back up where you could actually do those kind of agreements where India, frankly, should have questions and probably not do it.
President Trump is launching a $12 billion stockpile of critical and rare earth minerals in an effort to slash reliance on Chinese rare earths and curb Beijing's leverage in trade talks. The proposal, known as Project Vault, would launch a first-of-its-kind strategic critical mineral stockpile designed for the U.S. private sector. The moves build on a more direct role Washington has begun taking in the sector.
Today, we're launching what will be known as Project Vault to ensure that American businesses and workers are never harmed by any shortage. We don't want to ever go through what we went through a year ago. Just as although it did work out, thank you. Just as we have long had a strategic petroleum reserve and a stockpile of critical minerals for national defense, we're now creating this reserve for American industry so we don't have any problems. This historic initiative will combine $10 billion in export-import bank financing with $2 billion in private sector financing and We even expect the American taxpayer to make a profit from the interest on the loan used to start the Project Vault. It's an amazing thing. They've been talking about it for years. Other presidents did a lot of talking, but they didn't do anything. Over the past year, my administration has taken extraordinary steps to make sure the United States has all of the critical minerals and rare earths that we need. We're investing in mining projects. We're expediting federal permitting. The federal permitting, and a lot of it is Lee Zeldin has been fantastic, but federal permitting is such a big deal.
Finance Minister Francois-Philippe Champagne spoke with reporters in Ottawa following the second reading of the Liberal government's food affordability bill, known as Bill C-19. The proposed legislation includes a 25% increase to the GST rebate, a move the government says is aimed at helping Canadians cope with the rising cost of groceries and other essentials. The bill cleared its second reading in the House of Commons on Monday, with MPs also approving a Conservative motion to fast-track the legislation through Parliament. That means the bill could move more quickly through the remaining stages of debate and committee review. Champagne said the government wants to get relief to Canadians as soon as possible, as pressure continues to mount over affordability and cost of living concerns across the country.
Just finished second reading of the bill, which is the Canada Groceries and Essentials benefit, a very important measure for Canadians. Canadians, families know across the country that food inflation is a complex issue. But that being said, they expect us to take measures to help them. What we have announced is a boost for this fiscal year, but also a bridge towards our Vision 2030. People that I've talked to understand that we have a vision to grow the economy, but it's going to take a bit of time before they feel it in their wallet and on the shop floor and in the farms. So what we have been providing is immediate measure. We had seen that if you look at excess food inflation since COVID-19 was around $782. So that's the boost that we're giving this year. So you can compensate for the loss or the excess food price that you had, and at the same time increasing the benefit by 25% on a going forward basis before we see the result of the investment. So I certainly hope that my colleagues understand Canadian families sent us here to do one thing, is to support them in time of needs. This is in line with Canadian values. This is going to make a difference in the lives of Canadians, and it's part of a suite of measures to make life more affordable in the country.
Calgary Conservative MP Michelle Rempel-Garner says major reform is needed on immigration policy in Canada. Rempel-Garner says the huge influx of foreigners is causing our emergency rooms to overflow and creating a housing shortage. She has also been quite critical of the Liberals' gun buyback program and shared details with our Western Canada Bureau Chief, Hal Roberts.
Now, Michelle, you've been a little outspoken when it comes to the immigration file for good reason. You're the immigration critic.
Yes.
What seems to be the problem with the current framework here in our country?
Well, I think it's pretty simple. The Liberals let in too many people too fast for housing, healthcare, and jobs to keep up. And that's not fair to anybody. It's not fair to newcomers, and it's not fair to Canadians because, the levels that the Liberals, set over the last decade. We've seen the impact on housing. You see emergency rooms overflowing. And, the Liberals have been very lenient with the temporary foreign worker program, which has, I think, contributed in part to the youth jobs crisis in Canada. So there needs to be major reforms. And we have, I think, over the last 6 months, certainly since the last federal election, put forward very concrete, very common sense proposals to restore order and fairness to Canada's immigration system.
Let's talk about the gun buyback program. It's been a bit of an issue as well. I mean, the federal government had a pilot project out in New Brunswick, $157,000 approximately. 25 guns were bought. That was it. Pretty expensive per gun. I mean, Newfoundland, Labrador not really behind. A lot of police forces not behind it.
Yep.
So what message is this really sending to the Carney government?
Well, here's the reality. The vast, overwhelming majority of firearms violence in Canada are, the firearm that's used has been smuggled into Canada. It's related to gang violence. And the Liberal government, both under Mark Carney and Justin Trudeau, have been, completely negligent on policies that would strengthen Canada's borders and gang violence and, put criminals behind bars. I've been in the House of Commons for years now, watching them just ignore our calls for bail reform to make sure that we don't see that catch and release stuff happening. So no, I don't think that law-abiding firearms owners in Canada should be penalized due to just a decade of abject failure on behalf of the Liberal government to make Canada's streets safer.
Now, one of the resolutions discussed here was amending the criminal code to really presume lethal force is reasonable in acts of self-defense. Somebody breaks into your home, threatens you and your family, that it's reasonable here. What are your thoughts on that? Where do you stand on that?
Well, first of all, I think it's a really sad and sorry state of affairs that, after a decade of Liberal government, there are a lot of Canadians that they don't feel safe in their homes. And I think that's particularly problematic for rural Canadians. You hear a lot of, assaults that are happening in Canadians.
Farms and ranches?
Exactly. And so, I do think it is imperative that Canadians have the ability to defend themselves, particularly in their homes. And at the same time, the Liberals have a lot of work to do, as I just said, on reversing some of the damaging policies that we've seen cause a lot more violence and crime in Canada, like their incredibly disastrous catch and release bail policies.
Calgary Nose Hill Conservative MP Michelle Rumpel-Garner, thanks for your time.
Take care. Thank you.
And Hal Roberts also chatted with the former leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, Andrew Scheer, who says he is concerned about the separation rhetoric, not just in Alberta, but in his home province of Saskatchewan. He says the blame for potentially breaking up Canada can be laid squarely at the feet of the current government.
I will note that it's when Liberals in power, when Liberals are in power, that's when we get the national unity crises. Why? Because Liberals believe in an Ottawa knows best approach where people in powerful position dictate terms to the provinces. We saw that with the Liberals for the past 10 years, telling the people of Alberta they could not work in their industries, they could not develop their natural resources and sell it to the world. Obviously, that's going to create a sense of frustration with the way Confederation is working for this province. The good news is that it's conservative solutions that can not just allow Alberta to succeed, but actually champion what it does and keep our country united.
Now, there's a movement as well in your province, in Saskatchewan, Regina, also separation. So how do you deal with that? How do you approach that?
Again, I don't believe it's wise to attack those who feel like Canada isn't working for them. I believe it's important to understand that and then offer the solutions. And obviously, Alberta suffered under Liberal anti-development rules. Saskatchewan did too. We too have a vibrant oil and gas sector. We too were stymied and stifled from the No More Pipelines law and the industrial carbon tax and all those suite of programs that really hurt our province.
Former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, while speaking at an event alongside Jean Chrétien, says he did not sign a petition calling for an Alberta referendum.
And at this moment, our friend from the South has created a mood that a Canadian have never been so proud to be Canadian. In my province of Quebec, it's still the same thing today. The desire to have a referendum is very low in Quebec. Don't know what the hell is going on in Alberta. But I have to go there. I have 500 cousins.
I didn't sign the petition.
Any Tories did?
I'm told not.
want an answer.
I'm told not.
Anyway, we're having fun. Canada will remain united, don't worry.
An Alberta separatist movement leader recently said some members of Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's caucus have signed the petition calling for a vote on Alberta leaving Canada. Harper told the Ottawa event that this is a moment of revived nationalism around the world, and there is no reason for Canadians to not feel deep pride in their country.
Look, we are living in an age. The one thing, I travel around the world on business now, still do a bit of politics. The one thing about this world, whether we like it or not, we are living in an age of nationalism. Everywhere. Revived nationalism. And there is no reason why this country should not be as nationalistic as anyone else. We have a lot to be proud of. It's a tremendous country. I think just about any person and almost anywhere in the world would love to be here, to have the circumstances of our country. Well, we have a great history. Obviously, we have a great land, a tremendous, gift of Providence. Great land, but we have a great history. And, there's been so much emphasis in the past, let's say decade, about all the things we've done wrong. Okay, fine. But look, all the things we've done wrong have been things that like the things we've done right, that we have built upon. We've corrected mistakes, and we've built, I think, quote Mr. Chrétien, the best country in the world. So, let's be proud. And our pride doesn't have to be just, not liking Donald Trump. We should be proud in who we are as a people and as a nation.
An Alberta junior hockey team is mourning the loss of 3 players who were killed Monday in a crash while on their way to practice. The Southern Alberta Mustangs shared the news in a Facebook post, saying they're working closely with authorities and providing support to players, staff, and the families affected. RCMP say the collision occurred Monday morning at an intersection along Highway 2 in Staveley, about an hour south of Calgary. It involved a northbound semi-truck hauling gravel and a small passenger vehicle traveling east. Police say that the 2 18-year-olds, JJ Wright and Cameron Casorso, both died in the collision, as did their 17-year-old teammate Caden Fine, who was from Alabama. The driver of the semi, a 40-year-old man, was treated for minor injuries. The investigation into the crash continues. New data shows the City of Toronto has purchased millions of meth and crack pipes over the past 5 years as part of its harm reduction efforts, and the numbers are staggering. What's more, it appears city officials aren't tracking whether the program is actually making a difference. Municipal bureaucrats have said they don't have evidence showing that distributing these items produces measurable benefits. The figures come to light after advocacy group Integrity TO filed a Freedom of Information request late last year. In response, Toronto Public Health confirmed that between 2021 and 2025, it procured 2.34 million meth pipes, 3.45 million crack pipes, and 14.9 million syringes through the Ontario Harm Reduction Distribution Program. I'm now joined by the author of this report, our correspondent Adam Zivo, for more on his findings. Adam, thank you so much for the time.
Thanks for having me.
Now, before we get into the specifics of the program, I want to ask you about the volume of drug paraphernalia given out. What does the volume say about just how serious the drug problem is here in Canada?
Well, I mean, the drug problem in Canada is very serious, but the amount of crack pipes that we're giving out is completely disconnected from any sort of reality here, and that there's no world where we should be giving out millions of crack pipes to drug users. There's no justification for this program.
Um, how much has it actually cost taxpayers? Do we know an exact number?
We don't know because when I asked Toronto Public Health for those figures, and when Integrity TO asked Toronto Public Health for these figures, we were told that they didn't have that data because this paraphernalia is paid for by the province. And so then I emailed the province and asked questions about this program, and they simply stated that they do not support giving out drug paraphernalia. And then when I sent up follow-up questions asking, well, how was this program allowed to run? They didn't respond. So at that point, they didn't seem to be interested in having a further conversation. So I didn't inquire into the cost beyond that point because it didn't seem like it was going to go anywhere.
Now, if it is a cost that taxpayers are having to pay, should it not be public knowledge?
I mean, I think it's understood to a certain extent that Toronto and Ontario are giving out crack pipes and meth pipes, but unfortunately, harm reduction programs are often shrouded in secrecy because I think to a certain degree, policymakers who are involved with them understand that they're deeply unpopular. And so, unfortunately, we have to really try hard to get this information out of these bureaucrats who really resist sharing this info. And I think it's a betrayal of the public trust.
Right. Now, supporters say that clean syringes, for example, reduce the spread of disease. Is this not a positive goal? And do we know if we're seeing a reduction in disease transmission because of this?
Well, I really want to emphasize the difference between giving out syringes and giving out crack and meth pipes.
Right.
So with syringes, there is some evidence that this does reduce the transmission of infectious diseases. I do have issues with the way that we distribute our syringes. I would prefer to have an exchange program rather than just giving them out like candy because we see them discarded throughout our streets. But at the same time, I understand the fundamentals of this program, and I think that that it's okay, it's acceptable.
Right.
It could be improved, of course. When it comes to crack pipes, the provincial government and by extension the municipal government in Toronto has zero credible evidence that this improves public health whatsoever. So I inquired to Toronto Public Health. I said, hey, how are you tracking the impacts of this program? What performance indicators are you using? And what evidence do you have that this benefits society at all. And so they didn't respond with any indicators, which suggests they don't actually have any and that this is not being tracked. And then when it came to the justificatory evidence, they sent me a evidence review that had been conducted in 2023. So I went through that review. You know, most journalists don't, but I did. And there were only 4 studies that covered the distribution of crack and meth pipes.
And sorry to interrupt, but how would you change or make it more effective with the distribution process? What would you change for Canada to make it better?
I mean, for syringes, I'm not going to touch that because that's a very complicated subject. But when it comes to crack pipes, I would just cut it completely. Because, like, when I say they don't have evidence, this is what I mean. Of the 4 studies, one of them, they just interviewed 4 staffers at a specialty hospital, and at least 2 of them were just secretaries, like receptionists. And they asked the receptionist, "What is your impression of this program?" And the receptionist said, "I guess it builds trust." Now, of the remaining 3, one study was a series of focus groups with 31 Victoria-based drug users in 2010. And the Victoria drug addicts said, well, if we receive meth pipes for free, we might share less often. That is the extent of the evidence that we have. The second study was a 2011 study where they interviewed a similar number of drug addicts in Vancouver. And those drug addicts actually said that sharing pipes is essential to the social aspect of smoking crack. And therefore, they didn't believe that free pipes would reduce sharing. So not only does the city have no evidence, no real evidence that this works, they're also sitting on a study that, you know, has a weak methodology, but contradicts their very perspective, right?
Right.
And then the third study, you know, they surveyed about 100 to 200 drug addicts in the early 2010s in Vancouver, you know, before and after thousands of safer smoking kits were distributed. And the study concluded that, sure, giving out thousands of pipes makes this paraphernalia more accessible, but they were unable to show that that actually led to safer smoking practices. So of the 3 studies that are barely credible in this evidence base, 2 suggest that this intervention don't work.
And are there public safety risks with this approach?
I mean, I think that no one likes to see crack pipes discarded all throughout their cities.
Right.
Right. So if you talk to any public safety advocate in Toronto or any major Canadian city, you'll hear again and again that there is a problem with drug paraphernalia being discarded everywhere, including in spaces where kids play and congregate.
Right.
Integrity TO, which is the organization that sourced this data through their FOI request, constantly receives photographs from Torontonians who are disgruntled who say, why is there a meth pipe just beside my kids' playground? Why are there discarded meth pipes beside the library where I take my kids? And that's bad enough as it is. What's worse is that these meth pipes are paid for by taxpayers like you and I with no evidence that they benefit society.
Well, the aesthetic side aside, because obviously no one wants to see crack pipes or meth pipes in a downtown. But have there been any sort of spread of diseases or anything because of the fact that they are just laying around?
No. I mean, to my knowledge, no, we're also not tracking that.
Right.
But I think the harms to society here are not, you know, the spread of diseases from accidentally touching a pipe. I think it's just that if you have meth pipes discarded everywhere, it sends a negative message to kids. It makes people feel uncomfortable in public spaces. It signals that these spaces are not for everyone to use, that they
Right.
are dominated by drug addicts. And I think that, you know, having shattered glass around may be an infectious disease issue, but it's more about safety. You don't want
Right.
glass pipes everywhere.
So I guess on that, if Toronto is choosing to distribute these pipes, what do you think Toronto should do to also be cleaning them up? Should there be some sort of cleanup crew or something that is also holding themselves accountable to make sure that the mess isn't there?
I mean, they should be hiring cleanup crews to remove syringes and pipes, but I think that if you were to hire a cleanup crew to clean up these pipes, it wouldn't address the fundamental issue here, which is that there's no reason for us to be distributing these pipes at all.
Right.
Right. Look, I would be less opposed to this if the city could have provided a study that said actually this reduces infectious disease transmission, but they can't do that. So why are we spending millions of dollars giving out meth pipes and crack pipes, sometimes to minors, by the way, simply because 31 drug addicts in Vancouver 16 years ago said it might reduce their pipe sharing?
Well, we've also seen an increase in talks about involuntary care. Where do we stand right now on that? And is that actually being implemented or is it going to be implemented?
So Alberta is beginning to implement that, but the problem with involuntary care is that the evidence base for that is mixed. So we don't know much about it. So supporters of involuntary care do recognize that those gaps in the evidence base. but they say that given the current circumstances, it's worth trying out, with the understanding that the success rate is likely going to be low. But committing someone to involuntary care repeatedly is better than doing nothing and leaving them to slowly kill themselves.
Right. And in your opinion, what is the ideal approach to solve this drug crisis that Canada's seeing? Because I mean, there have been so many things thrown around and so many suggestions, but what do you think is actually going to hit the wall and stick?
Controlling the supply of drugs. And by that, I don't mean about legalizing drugs, but I mean reducing the supply of horrific opioids and other illicit drugs in Canada and United States. So we're actually seeing a massive decline in overdose deaths and overdoses all throughout North America. And that's been traced back to the fact that China, after experiencing a lot of pressure from the United States, is clamping down on the export of fentanyl precursors, which means that organized criminals in Mexico and Canada have fewer ingredients to work with when it comes to synthesizing fentanyl in their homes and then, exporting that to the US. And so we see that controlling the illicit drug supply does have positive impacts, whereas radical harm reduction and giving out free drugs and giving out free crack pipes doesn't make the problem better. It only enables people.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for the time and for breaking that down. As always, we appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Medical evacuees from Gaza have entered Egypt as the Rafah crossing reopens, but few Palestinians will be allowed to cross in either direction daily. Monday's opening is a key step in the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, but mostly symbolic. About 20,000 Palestinian children and adults needing medical care hope to leave devastated Gaza via the crossing, according to Gaza health officials. Thousands of other Palestinians outside the territory hope to enter and return home. It was unclear if anyone was allowed into Gaza on Monday. We're now going to shift our focus to new data from the federal government, looking at a decline in smoking rates. Our contributor David Clement has more.
Tonight, new government data reveals a surprising success story in Canada's fight against smoking, and it is challenging long-held assumptions about how to help people quit. According to Health Canada's latest progress report, smoking rates have plummeted from 29% in 2001 to just 11% today. Youth smoking has hit a record low at under 2%, and Canada is on track to meet its goal of reducing tobacco use to less than 5% by 2035. But the most striking finding is this: vaping working as a cessation tool, and the government's own numbers show exactly that. Among Canadians who successfully quit, 21% used an e-cigarette to help them stop. That's roughly 63,000 people. That's nearly as many as use traditional nicotine patches and gum combined. Health Canada's modeling reveals something even more stark. Before vaping was legally available, Canada was projected to have an 8.5% smoking rate by 2035. With vaping as an alternative, that projection dropped to 5.1%. The federal report states plainly, the establishment of a legal vaping market has also helped many adults transition to a less harmful alternative to smoking. The stakes here are enormous. Canada loses 46,000 people every year to tobacco-related illnesses. The economic cost exceeds $10 billion annually in healthcare and lost productivity. With 1.2 million Canadians under 50 still smoking daily, finding effective cessation tools isn't optional, it's essential. Traditional methods work for many people. Combining nicotine products can nearly triple quit rates. But over half of successful quitters managed alone, suggesting that traditional therapies aren't necessarily reaching everybody who's trying to quit. For tens of thousands of Canadians, vaping offered what conventional methods couldn't. Canada has taken steps forward with other reduced risk products. In 2023, Health Canada approved nicotine pouches, which are a tobacco-free product now available at pharmacies. The government acknowledges vaping helps adults transition away from smoking. But inconsistencies still remain. Heat not burn products, which eliminate combustion and many of the harmful chemicals, face the same restrictions as regular cigarettes, despite offering significantly reduced risk. The obvious concern is youth, but Canada appears to have struck a balance. Youth vaping dropped from 15% in 2019 to 6% last year, below the government's own target, while maintaining a legal adult market. And on the retail front, retail compliance with vaping regulations improved from 69% to 90%. The WHO's framework aims to end the tobacco epidemic. But the question facing policymakers is this: should the focus be ending smoking-related death and disease, or eliminating all nicotine use? For the 300,000 Canadians who quit smoking last year, the method mattered less than the result. Some used patches, some quit cold turkey, and tens of thousands used vaping to escape cigarettes. As the country moves towards 2035, the government's own data suggests harm reduction. Embracing alternatives to combustible cigarettes may be one of the most powerful tools in the fight against tobacco-related disease.
The Justice Department says it has taken down several thousand documents and media that may have included victim-identifying information since it began releasing the last batch of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein. It blamed the release of sensitive information that drew an outcry from victims and their lawyers on mistakes that were technical or human error. In a letter to the New York judges, U.S. Attorney Jay Clayton wrote that the department had taken down nearly all material identified by victims or their lawyers, along with a substantial number of documents identified independently by the government. U.S. President Donald Trump is threatening to sue Grammys host Trevor Noah, accusing him of making what Trump calls false and defamatory remarks about his past association with the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Trump reacted after the awards show aired, posting a lengthy message on Truth Social. In it, he criticized both Noah and the Grammy themselves, calling the broadcast the worst and virtually unwatchable. The president was later asked about Noah's comments while speaking to reporters at an unrelated news conference, where he doubled down on his criticism.
He said that I spent time on Jeffrey Epstein's island. I didn't. I mean, he's a lightweight, this guy. He's a terrible, I think he's terrible. I thought he did a terrible job at the Grammys. I thought the whole Grammys was terrible. I watched part of it. It's not watchable. But he was a lousy host. I'd say not as bad as Jimmy Kimmel, but pretty close. And no, he made a statement about me and Jeffrey Epstein. I have nothing to do with that. I have nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. And in fact, if you look at the DOJ, they announced, they released 3 million pages. It's like this is all they're supposed to be doing. And frankly, the DOJ, I think, should just say, we have other things to do, because that whole thing has turned out, I mean, other than Bill Clinton and, Bill Gates and lots of people that there are a lot of questions about it, but nothing on me. But it was even sort of better than that, because they found that Jeffrey Epstein and this sleazebag writer named Michael Wolff were conspiring against Donald Trump to lose the election. So Epstein was conspiring with a writer for me to lose the election. So right there, you know that I had nothing to do with this guy. But yeah, it's a terrible thing. The amount of time that's being wasted. When Epstein was alive, like 10 years ago, nobody cared about it. But they're only doing it. But now it's really hitting back on them because Bill Clinton is such a big part of it. The Democrats are pushing it. And the problem is that it's turning out to be the Democrats that were with and conspired with Epstein. So I think you're probably going to see a little pullback from them. But think of it, they were working together to try and help me lose the election. But this is the Oval Office, so I guess that didn't work out too well.
And the Toronto Blue Jays are marking a major milestone next season, as the 2026 Major League Baseball campaign will be the club's 50th season. And to celebrate, the team is honoring one of the most iconic moments and players in franchise history. Blue Jays legend Joe Carter will be commemorated with a statue outside the Rogers Centre, recognizing his lasting impact on the team and the city.
Next year, we're celebrating our 50th, and we've been spending a lot of time thinking about the best ways to celebrate that. Something that our fans have been clamoring for. We both get emails about all the time.
Okay.
We're going to have a statue out front in between Gate 5 and Gate 6.
Of
We've
who?
been
Of Easton?
struggling. He was option 2.
He was option
Paul's
2?
yeah. But
Option 200.
can you think of any moment that would be
October 23rd, 1993.
11:39 p.m.
11:39 p.m.
Is that
I'll
what it
tell you
was?
something
Yeah.
right now.
11:39.
It was about as exciting a moment, and there's not a Canadian that was alive at that time that doesn't know where they were.
first World Series won on Canadian soil, and something for our fans to be able to come when they come to the games to spend time and remember and celebrate. And it's gonna involve you doing some modeling. I hope you're okay with that.
He loves that stuff.
Yeah.
You get that smile.
Wow.
So we wanted to tell you personally, and make it a moment not just for you but for all of our fans too.
Yeah,
so I know that.
It's an honor. I thank you guys. You know how much I love you guys and the Blue Jays and this city. That's why I come back and do all this stuff from the golf tournament. It's home for me. It really is. And to have an honor like that bestowed, man, that is
earned.
Yeah.
Earned.
And as special for
at a
our
loss for
fans.
words, really. And I'm not usually at a loss for
No,
words.
you're not usually lost for words.
It would be as special for the fans, because for so many of them, multi-generations of Blue Jay fans, even ones that weren't here, they still have that memory of that moment.
Wow, that is an honor. I thank you guys.
Yeah.
I feel.
It's
thank you,
appropriate.
Mark. I
It's
feel
appropriate.
honored.
Yeah.
The Blue Jays won back-to-back World Series titles in 1992 and 1993, capped off by Carter's 3-run homer in the bottom of the 9th of Game 6 of their 1993 series with the Philadelphia Phillies to clinch the title again. I'm Teresa Skubik, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Good night, Canada.